everyone, so now we're going to move on from polynomials to square roots. So we've already done some simplifying, things like that, but today we're going to work on solving square root equations. So let's do a review of solving x squared problems. So pause the video and try these two. So there's a couple ways to do this first one. The easy way is the inverse of x squared is just the square root. The one thing is, it's not just 7 though. Remember, it's plus or minus 7, because negative 7 squared is also 49. Number 2, we're going to do an MC chart, right? So multiply to negative 20, combine to 8. Right? Multiply negative 20, combine to 8, and we get 2 and 10, and the 2 is negative. So x minus 2, x plus 8 equals 0. And then when we solve, just like with the roots that we were doing with the polynomials, we just switch the sign. That's it. Okay, so now again, same idea. This is all algebra 1 except for number 4, and we just did one like it. So pause the video and solve these. All right, so we subtract 5 on each side, and we get 7. We divide by 4. We get negative 11. We multiply both sides by 7. 56. And we take the square root of both sides. X equals, the square root of 100 is 10, and it's plus or minus. Okay, so now why did we subtract? Because we had plus, right? X plus 5. What's the opposite or the inverse of adding 5? Subtracting 5. In number 2, we have 4x. That's 4 times x. The opposite of times is division, right? The opposite of multiplication. To get rid of the 4, we do the inverse operation. We divide. In number 3, we're dividing, right? The opposite of dividing is multiplying. So I multiplied by 7, canceled, and I got 56. The opposite or inverse of squaring a number is square rooting a number. So if the opposite of squaring a number is square rooting, what's the opposite of a square root? Right. So think about this. What if I had the square root of x equals 8? If the opposite of a square is a square root, the opposite of a square root is a square. So all we're going to do is square both sides. The square root of x squared cancels out, and then we just get 64. So to solve an equation, we use the opposite or inverse operation. The inverse of a square root is a square. All right, so we end up squaring both sides. To solve, square both sides of the equal sign. So again, if I had the square root of x equals 9, we're not taking the square root. The opposite of a square root is a square. So the square and the square root cancel out, and we're left with an x. 9 squared is 81. And that's how you do it. The square root of 81 is 9, if you plug in to check. Okay, so now let's solve some problems. So the first thing we want to check is our square root alone. Is there anything outside the square root on the same side? There is not. So the inverse of a square root is just a square. So the square root and the square cancel each other out. We're left with 2x minus 3 equals, what's 5 squared? 25. And then we go through and just solve like normal. So I'm going to add 3. 2x equals 28, and then divide by 2, so I get 14. Right. So pause and do number 2 on your own. So again, I'm going to square both sides to get rid of the inverse of the square root. So x plus 4 equals 8 squared is 64. Subtract 4 on both sides, and I get 60. Done. All right, getting a little harder. What do you think we have to do here? So the square root is not by itself. So this 7 on the outside has to be moved. You don't have to worry about what's on the inside. It's the outside stuff that's the issue. So I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides. I have a lot of 8's in this, don't I? X square root of x minus 11 equals 8. Now I square both sides. Once the square root is by itself with nothing outside, square x minus 11 equals 64. Add 11, and I get 75. All right, I want you to pause and try number 4. So now what are we doing with the 3? Are we going to subtract it? No, so 3 is touching the square root. What does it mean when we're touching? It means we are multiplying. So we're going to, the opposite of multiply is divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 3. So the square root of x minus 9 equals 6. Then we square both sides. X minus 9 is 36. Add 9 to both sides, and I get 45. And we're done. Okay, so now we have 2 operations. So think of it like this. If I had 3 minus 2x equals 27, right? Imagine instead of that whole square root of x plus 4, it was just a big X. What would you do first? We'd subtract to the 3, and then we divide, right? Subtract and add, then we divide. All right, so I'm going to erase this. So I'm going to subtract my 3 first. Negative 2, the square root of x plus 4 equals 24. I'm going to divide by negative 2. The square root of x plus 4 equals negative 12. Square both sides. I get 12 squared is 144. Minus 4, and I get 140. All right, I want you to pause and try the other one on your own. So I'm going to subtract by 5. So negative 8, the square root of x plus 4 is negative 16. Divide by negative 8. The square root of x plus 4 equals 2. Square both sides. X plus 4 equals 4. Subtract, and I get x equals 0. Okay, so now I want you to look at these. One of these, there's actually no real solution. One of these doesn't actually work. So remember in Algebra 1, we like to check. We plug into the original to check that it worked. So if you do that here, one of these actually doesn't work. Right? So I'm going to plug into the original. So 3 minus 2, the square root of 140 plus 4. Does that really equal 27? And then on this other one, I've got 5 minus 8 times the square root of 0 plus 4. Does that really equal negative 11? One of those doesn't work, so either grab your calculator or do something. All right, so this one, number 5, don't have a lot of space. This is 144, so I get 3 minus 2 times the square root of 144. The square root of 144 is 12. So I get 3 minus 24. Is 3 minus 24 27? It's not. It's negative 21. So that means that 140 isn't actually an answer. Number 6, on the other hand, it actually does work. We get 5 minus 8 times the square root of 4, right? 0 plus 4 is negative 11. 5 minus 8 times 2. 5 minus 16 is negative 11. That does work. So that one is correct. All right, so now look at number 5. And why do you think that didn't work? There's a really specific spot that's the issue. It's kind of hidden. All right, I'm going to erase the part that is kind of making it where you can see. See how we have the square root equals negative 12? Can a square root equal a negative? Can you plug a square root in and get a negative number? No. That's like, we have square root of a negative is imaginary, but the square root of x plus 4 will never equal negative 12. So anytime it equals negative 12, there's actually going to be no solution. Right? If you notice the other one, even though it had that negative 11 over here, once we got the square root of x plus 4 by itself, it equaled a positive 2. So that one does work. Okay, so isolate to solve a square root. We're going to isolate the square root. Move anything outside the square root to the other side. You can have stuff on the inside, right? X plus smiley face is okay. That's fine. What you can't have is anything outside the square root. Once we get the square root by itself, we square both sides and then we solve for x. Okay, so pause and try these two on your own. Number 8 we already did. Whoopsies, I forgot to change it. So cross off number 8, try number 7 on your own. So I'm going to subtract 3. Negative 5, the square root of 2x plus 8 equals negative 40. Divide by negative 5. I get 8. Square both sides. And I have no negatives. Notice that square root does not equal a negative. 64 equals 2x plus 8 minus 8. And I get 56. Divide by 2 and I get 28. You can, if you want to plug in to check, you can. This will work. Okay, so those were the easy ones. Now we're getting into the harder ones. So, first question, is the square root by itself? It is. So we do the inverse. The inverse of a square root is a square. So we square both sides. What's x squared? X squared is just x squared. What happens with the square root of 3x plus 4 squared? The square root goes away, and we're just left with this. How do we solve an equation that has an x squared in it? Look back at the do now number 2. What did we do? We need to get 0 on one side of the equal sign. So I'm going to subtract 3x and subtract 4. So I have 0 equals x squared minus 3x minus 4. All right, I want you to factor and solve. So MC chart, what multiplies to negative 4 combines to negative 3. 1 and 4, who's negative? The 4 is negative, the 1 is positive. And then when we solve, we switch the sign. Now, one of these does not work. So you can plug into the original problem. Now, be careful. A lot of times it's the negative that doesn't work, but don't assume that that's always the case. Sometimes you do have the negative works and the other number doesn't. So I'm going to plug into the original. 3 times negative 1 plus 4. Does that equal negative 1? Now, don't square both sides. We're just plugging in and simplifying each side. So this left side is the square root of 1. Does that equal negative 1? No, that does not work. So a negative 1 is not an answer. So now I'm going to do 3 times 4 plus 4. Does that equal 4? Does the square root, right, 3 times 4 is 12, plus 4 is 16. Does that equal 4? That does work. So x equals 4 is our answer. So in this case, the negative 1 didn't work, but be careful, that's not always the case. All right, so step 1, isolate the square root. What do we do to isolate the square root? We have to move that x that's on the outside. So I'm going to add x to both sides. All right, so this one is just like the last one. I want you to pause the video and try it on your own. So I'm going to square both sides. The square root goes away. I need 0 on one side, so I'm going to minus 6 and add x. Now I'm going to put those in order though. So x squared, instead of the minus 6 next, I'm going to put plus x and then minus 6, the order of a regular trinomial. Factor. See what we get when we factor. What multiplies to negative 6 combines to positive 1. Negative 2 and 3. Oops. Plus 3. Okay, so we get x equals 2, x equals negative 3. So now plug into the original. Be careful, this one's a little tricky because of the signs. All right, so we got the square root of 6 minus 2 equals 0. And the square root of 6 minus negative 3 minus negative 3 equals 0. Which one of those works? This is the square root of 4 minus 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. So that one works. So x equals 2 works. This is the square root of 9 plus 3. Does 3 plus 3 equal 0? No. So that one doesn't work. This level I do expect you to be able to do. These are easy enough, even though they're quadratic. They're easy enough that they're pretty, you should be able to do these. Now, 11 and 12 are the hard ones. I wouldn't necessarily ask this on a quiz, but I think you should be able to do it. Okay, so first step is we isolate the square root. How do we isolate the square root? Add 2 to both sides. So we get 3x plus 24 equals x plus 2. Now, what do we do to get rid of the square root? We are going to square both sides. Now, here's the thing. This is just 3x plus 24. What is x plus 2 squared? That's x plus 2 times x plus 2. So I'm going to come to the side and do this out. So x, this is double distributing. It is not x squared plus 4. If you put x squared plus 4, you're going to regret it because it will not work. So I'm double distributing x times x plus 2, and then 2 times x plus 2. So x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4. I'm just distributing x squared plus 4x plus 4. So I get x squared plus 4x plus 4. That's the hardest part. Once you get past that, the rest of it's pretty straightforward. So we want 0 on one side, just like before. So I'm going to subtract 3x. Line up, the x's go together, and then minus 24. So we get x squared plus x minus 20. All right, finish it. MC chart. So multiply to negative 20, combine to 1. That's 5 and negative 4. X plus 5, x minus 4. Switch our signs, right? Just like with the roots. And then plug in to figure out which one's the answer. Can we tell that one of them won't work? Yeah. Remember, a square root is never going to equal negative. So the fact that that's the minus 2, that's not going to work. I do want to check the 4 just in case. So 3 times 4 plus 24 minus 2. That's 12 plus 24. That's the square root of 36 minus 2. 6 minus 2 is 4. So that does work. So 4 is the answer. Okay, last one. Same, very similar to that last one. So I want you to pause and try it on your own. All right, so I'm going to add the x to both sides. So 2x plus 4 equals x plus 8. Now, if you put 8 plus x, it's not a big deal. I just like the x in front. I'm going to square both sides. All right, so x plus 8 squared is x plus 8 times x plus 8. X times x plus 8. 8 times x plus 8. Distribute. X squared plus 16x plus 64. Right, so the square root goes away. Oops, I just dropped the 2 that was in front of the 24. X squared plus 16x plus 64. All right, you should be able to finish it. I'm going to fix that so it's not so terrifying. All right, get 0 on one side, factor, and solve. So minusing 2x and minusing 24. X squared plus 14x plus 40. What multiplies to 40 and adds to 14? It's pretty easy, just 10 and 4, sorry. X equals -10, x equals -4. All right, so notice these are both negatives. Let's see what happens. I honestly don't even know which one's going to work. Or maybe neither work. Let's see. All right, so I've got 2 times -10 plus 24 minus -10. Does that equal 8? And then under here, do the same thing. So I've got the square root of 2 times -4 plus 24 minus -4. Does that equal 8? All right, so this gives me the square root of 4 plus 10. The square root of 4 is 2, so 2 plus 10 does not equal 8. So this first one, the -10, does not work. Let's try this next one. 2 times -4 is -8. So this is the square root of 16 plus 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. So there's our negative that does work. So be careful. Sometimes you do get negatives that work and other negatives that don't. Okay? All right, and that is this lesson. Hope it wasn't too bad. We're actually moving on from here. We're only doing a day on this. So do your homework, practice, and I will see you later. Bye.